virtually flying across the pond here from the UK. On the podcast today, on the show, is Lisa Morton. We're going to be talking about purposeful relationships and clarity in communication. You're going to love what we talk about as we dive into mission and values and all kinds of different things that intermingle to create true PR.
Welcome to Advance with Mike Acker, the podcast designed to help entrepreneurs, business leaders, and professionals alike break through barriers by improving their practical leadership skills and increasing confidence in speaking. Your host is a best-selling author, executive coach, and founder of the Advance Public Speaking School and Advantage Publishing Group, two companies dedicated to providing an edge for leaders. Find out more about Mike at mikeacker.com. Now here's your host, Mike Acker.
All right. Thank you so much, Lisa, for joining me today on the program. Welcome.
Thank you so much for inviting me, Mike. Looking forward to it.
And we found a little connection before we were talking here, before we dove in, that you are in Manchester, and I've been to Manchester. So welcome to the podcast from Manchester. So tell us a little bit about your team affiliation, who you root for.
Yeah, so as you can see, it wasn't deliberate, but I'm a United fan. So we're on the red side of the city. And I've actually got blue nails today. And the guy that runs the coffee shop near our offices was very happy to see me with blue nails. He's a City fan and he gave me a free coffee. But I took my coat off and he wasn't too pleased after all. I think he wanted it back. But we're a big football city. Absolutely. There's a massive rivalry, yes, but it's great. It's all in good fun.
Well, you know, the majority of the audience here on the podcast and on the YouTube are in the United States. And yet we do have a lot of people from different places around the world. And so it's very interesting to think about that perspective when I interviewed someone last week from Spain and now here in the UK. So very fun. I love that we get to do this and think about times of COVID. Obviously, lots of obstacles, but many opportunities. And we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about communication, business communication, how to up that communication. But before we dive into that, can you give us a little snapshot of who you are?
Sure. Yes. Okay. So I am, firstly, and most importantly, I'm a mum to two amazing kids. I've got a son who's 23 and my daughter's 21. And I've run my business pretty much the whole time. My business is now 25 years old. So that brought its challenges along the way. It's headquartered in Manchester, and we have an office in London now, a small team in London, and we have a partnership with an agency in LA and New York. So we set that up 2 weeks before COVID, and we signed that deal at the Beverly Hills Hotel. And when I came out to see Oprah. And then we went into lockdown, but it was the best thing we did because we've done lots of international work, doing work like this in actual fact in the past 2 years. So it was actually just serendipity, I think, that we did that just before March 2020.
Aren't you so glad that quarantine didn't start a couple weeks earlier? So you had that opportunity with Oprah and had that opportunity.
Completely. And it was just so bizarre, really, because it was an event with Oprah, and I think it was Tom Hanks was there and Rita Wilson, and I think Rita got COVID just after that, and it was just massive news. And we were coming back on the plane, and people were starting to wear masks, and we had no idea at that point what was about to come a few weeks later. But yeah, I mean, it was an amazing trip, not just to be inspired by Oprah, but also to set up this fantastic partnership, which has really kept us going because our business was massively affected, but that partnership and the ability to be able to communicate globally was a really kind of great support for us.
Yeah, what incredible. I mean, the stories that are emerging out of people's resilience and how people have adjusted and flexibility and how business has adjusted is just remarkable. Tell us a little bit about what your communication agency does so that we have kind of a paradigm of or a framework for how to understand what you're going to teach us today.
Well, historically, when I started my agency off, my kids can't believe this, it was before the internet. So communication was much more difficult, I have to say, and it was reliant on, we would send press releases off and hard copy photographs, prints, in the post to journalists, and then they might appear in the press, a week or 3 weeks later, and we had a fax machine. But over the years, and certainly say since the last recession, 2008, we had to move very quickly from being a traditional PR company into an integrated communications agency. And then we were one of the first agencies to adopt social media marketing, digital marketing. And what became apparent at that time was the fact that PR stood for Purposeful Relationships. So we changed the PR to that. And what we do is we build relationships and create connections, build audiences, and create purpose between businesses, brands, and individuals. And we just use a whole array of different platforms to do that. And those platforms are bespoke in terms of where our clients' audiences may hang out, where they receive their information, and how they need to receive it. So the strategy part of it is really important. And those are the pieces there, the pieces of the jigsaw. And as you say, technology and this kind of technology and video conferencing, which was thrust upon us, has actually again changed our business massively. Just before lockdown, again, it was pure coincidence, I decided to launch a podcast, and that's called We Built This City. And that was to celebrate the length of time that we as a company had been at the heart of Manchester, and all the changes and all the people who had created this legacy. And we launched it as we went into lockdown. And for the next 3 months, we had to do all of those interviews online like this, so that we had to learn a whole new set of skills in actual fact in doing that. But it was so successful, because what we realized is that, like you can reach a really diverse audience. We have downloads in the States and in Iceland in particular, for some reason, Norway. There's a lot of United fans in Norway. And on the back of that, we've helped to use that audio strategy for our clients. So we've now just launched a podcast company. We've got a dozen podcasts that we're building for brands through that, to use that platform. So like you say, it's taking advantage of the challenges and finding ways around those communication issues that has really worked for us.
It's fascinating. It's really interesting how people have adjusted, like I said earlier, and to see what you've done right there. And what a great time to have already set up the podcast instead of jumping in. And now, one of the things that you talk a lot about is how leaders create leaders, and how really this platform has actually helped you do that. What do you mean when leaders create leaders? And then let's dive into how can we do that? Yeah,
well, Roland Dransfield as a business, I think we'd got to about 21 years old, and that was seminal in itself. And I'd gone through big growth in the company, and we'd taken on some senior lateral hires, rather than just having kind of brought leaders through organically, because we needed that faster pace in terms of skill set and sector. And it was great for 6 months, 8 months. And then I realized that what was important to me as a business leader and as a business owner, in terms of the values that sat with me, I felt that the organization was being diluted in terms of that by people who had come on board and had different experiences and different agendas. And it did take that time for me to realize that that was happening. And then one day, I mean, it had been accumulating over a period of time. There was a big issue in the team, and I just thought, okay, this is it. We've got to go back to basics, and we have to really look at what our values are. And we did a big piece of work at 21 years, whereby I knew that it was going to make some significant change, and I knew that the leaders that we had in the team at the time weren't necessarily leaders just because they had a title, because they'd had that senior title, and that there were true leaders in that team who perhaps were being made small, possibly by some of the behaviours by the leaders in the organisation. And we did an exercise where we really dug into our values. We read lots of books. We looked at the codes of sports teams, and we looked at big brands' values, and we worked on our own. And ultimately, they were, I suppose, those values are important to me. And one of them is leaders create leaders. And that has been one of the values that I would say has changed the business fundamentally. Every one of them. We have 15. Some people say to us, that's too many. It's not. We live every one of those values, and all relevant still. But the leaders create leaders was the principle that everybody can be a leader. And we are all leaders of somebody in some way. And if you propagate the myth that to be a leader, you have to have a certain set of characteristics, or you have to have a certain amount of experience or a certain personality, you are blocking out all the fabulous leaders that are here around and can support whatever purpose that you have. So we, and the value system that we put in place in Roland Dransfield meant that, for example, one of our values is sweep the sheds, and that's no job is too small, and it's taken from the All Blacks values. But it means that somebody who's 6 months into your business isn't the one that's got to go and clean the boardroom of coffee cups for the senior directors to come in and have their meeting. That's not right. You know, we have to all look after those small jobs. So we found that in really giving younger people the liberty to be a leader, they actually did take charge of aspects that they just weren't doing before, and they weren't frightened to do so.
So it's a little bit that principle of, even if you were at the top, you're not at the top, that reverted pyramid. Now, when you think about different styles of leadership, some people are more of a heavy-handed, a very firm leader, and some people are more of a grace-filled leader and more kind of kind, super nice right here. So you got this kind of grace and truth, this kindness, firmness, and in the midst of your 15 values, in the midst of your leadership culture, how do you create leaders who have a bit of both sides of those, that firmness and kindness?
Yeah, I mean, I think that is the conversations that we do have around empathy in the team. You know, when is too much empathy too much? I think that when we show up in life in an organization as a leader, or we kind of go on that journey, there's so much stuff that we've accumulated along the way in terms of our own personal conditioning, or how our parents have engaged with us, or the roles that we've been expected to play alongside our siblings, and how we fitted into that dynamic in a family, for example, or at school or at university. And I think, you know, it's very difficult if you are an empath. You are going to have to do some work on yourself to understand that it's okay to have boundaries, that boundaries are actually a good thing. You know, it took me a very long time to understand. Even though I knew what my boundaries were, sometimes I would feel like I'd have to apologize for those. So we're very clear on that. Our values in the organization do have boundaries. We're very clear on the fact that we won't tolerate in the organization people who don't have the same behaviors that we've decided are our values. We won't work with a client just because a client will going to pay us big fees, and that it might mean there's a bonus down the line. We won't tolerate that now, and we have been complicit, as all organizations are sometimes, in poor behavior in the supply chain, that you know it's a red flag, but you'll allow it anyway because it will get you closer to that financial target or whatever. So we're constantly doing work around that. I mean, we check in on our values every single week as a team, so that we can understand where we're finding those challenges. And one of our values is admit it, fix it, move on. And that is not a cop-out. That's not just, okay, it doesn't matter if we screw up, it's fine, let's just get on with it. It's about really digging into what the mistake was. Tell us about the mistake. We don't just want to have good news. We're okay. It's okay to make mistakes, but let's figure out how we can better ourselves. And we sometimes like it to, the Japanese art of kintsugi, where, you mend something broken with gold, and it's more beautiful after the mistake or the accident than it was before. And that's that, continual learning and development, and also the space for people who haven't possibly got the experience or the lived life experience to have all those answers. They're supported in a safe environment if you got the values of the organization right.
Yeah. So really a huge part of that is those boundaries, and your values create the boundaries of whether you're going too far in firmness, too far in kindness. If you're getting past the guardrails, I always love that imagery of the guardrails, and on the side of the road, you have those ones there. You're not hoping to get too close to them, but they're there. If you get too close to them, you're going to screech up against them. Yeah. So you have all these values, and they guide you. They're your guardrails. They're keeping you in the boundaries of of how much empathy is too much empathy, how much is the right amount of empathy, how much is too little empathy, which we know is the cornerstone of emotional intelligence. So how do you, when you're working with other clients, with customers, with companies, with people, all the different people you represent, how do you help them communicate their values internally and externally? Because it's both parts, right? This is who we are, but also this is who we are.
Very much so. And I think there's been a real shift in recent years, and definitely throughout the last 2 years of the pandemic, whereby that whole transparency piece is so important. It has been so important. I have been staggered over the years at how many organizations either don't know what the values are, or they don't know what they stand for, and certainly their teams could never describe what they are. And that has made a huge difference, I think, in terms of which businesses have really thrived over the past 2 years and which businesses have lost direction. So somebody asked me this question the other day and said, is it easier when you've got a small team to actually really make sure that you walk and talk the values? But I fundamentally believe it has to start internally, and ideally, if you are starting afresh, we have clients who have come to us to help them really get to grips with those values and then start to communicate them. And then we've got other clients who have got values that were in a drawer somewhere, or on a screensaver or something, and they'd forgotten about them. And it's finding a way to live each of those values, so nobody is going to know what their organization stands for by learning by rote what the values are, unless the values are part of the DNA of the organization, unless they show up every day, so that the behaviors and the activities and the language reflect those values. And it can take time. I mean, it's not something that's going to happen overnight.
Right. And
I think one of the issues is that businesses want a quick fix to that. So they're in a situation whereby they've got, post-COVID, people some organizations, their teams lost sight of who they're actually working for, because they were on a Zoom call the whole time. So that whole, beer pong and all that kind of stuff, and dogs in the office, all that was a culture, which it wasn't. It was the sticking plaster for a culture that disappeared, and so they lost track of all of that. So
right,
but the businesses who have had those in place before COVID. I mean, one of our clients was amazing. They literally did an address every single morning to the team. State of the nation. We don't have all the answers, but we're going to tell you what we know, what we can tell you right now. They'd check in. They had a system where somebody checked in with every single person at 9:30 every day to see how they were doing, because everyone was frightened. They were a wealth management company. They had got a lot of older clients, and so they had tea time with some of their older clients, where they would literally arrange to have a cup of tea online with some older people who were very isolated. They did loads of stuff for charity. They sent goodie boxes around to the team, and they lived their values. I mean, they couldn't have been more aligned with what they said they were all about. And so for me, that was a fantastic, and they grew their business massively in that year. But then there are other organizations who, once they've moved out of the fabulous glossy offices in Manchester here, for example, and we're at home, nobody could see what was written on the wall anymore. And that was all there was that existed of their values. So for me, and the way that we work with our clients, is the fact that you've got to take that time and to do that work, and make sure that your team is on board and has been part of that process. Because if you've had values in place for 5 years, they might not actually reflect what your business and your culture is like now. So you always have to look at refreshing them.
Yeah, that's true. And I was recently speaking at an event, one of those few times where you get back in front of several hundred people. And we were actually talking about this, and I had a conversation with some of the gentlemen there about having those big momentous dropping the vision and then dripping the vision. But really, even just dropping the values, putting them up on the wall, putting them up on the screensaver, doing those things that are right there in front of you. Hey, this is our vision, or this is our values, but also dripping them, talking about them, communicating them, refreshing them, going back to them. What are you talking to people about if they've gone away from their values due to COVID, their stated values, maybe they made some compromises just because, like you said right there, they've gotten away from the office, they've gotten away from their beer pong, they've gotten away from some of those connection points. So how can businesses get back to that? Or is this the time to reestablish new values? What are you talking to people about there?
Yeah, we are working with a major law firm at the moment, and they are an organization that have great values, but the business is so big and it's international that ultimately it is sometimes you need to look at an iteration of values and a culture which works for your geographical presence to some degree, because, for example, Manchester might have a very different personality to Tokyo, for example. So it's, it's not always, a little bit. So, it's not one size fits all. So there is sometimes some red tape around that, which is really, it's an obstacle for a good culture to be created in an area where, for example, this law firm is international, but the majority of the work it's going to be doing at the moment is in Manchester or the Northwest. So it's got to be relevant, and also it taps into purpose. So for us, people don't really care how well you're doing anymore. I mean, when I started out in PR, a lot of the corporate PR we would do was, we've hit, this organization's hit these targets, it's had this amount of investment, it's grown here, it's exporting this. No one really cares. What people really care about now are people, and the people behind the brands, and the resources that are being created by brands. So how are they helping to make the world a better place, or how are they helping to support? So it's about the purpose. So much of the work we do now, and 25 years ago, it was virtually unheard of. We are helping brands and businesses tell stories around their purpose, and that engages. It helps with recruitment, it helps with retention, it helps with legacy, it helps bring good supplies into your supply chain, it helps you do good business and bring like-minded organizations to buy from you, essentially. So for me, when you can really communicate and so the starting point in a lot of cases is, let's get back to what your purpose is as an organization. What do you want to do? What do you want to be, how do you want to be talked about when you're not in the room? What heritage do you want to create? Because that, for us, is the starting point. We fundamentally believe as a business that you have to put more in than you take out. It's our duty as businesses to use the resources we have to create more resources, not just to use up everything that's around us. Yeah. So that's your purpose, and that is the magic that an organization can create, and that's what helps people really want to connect and be a part of an organization. So it's common sense.
I love this. Going back to the purpose thing is huge. It's something that I do personally, and at this spot in my life, I don't lead large teams like I have in the past, which has been fun, but I lead myself. And going back to that purpose for myself. So whether you're an entrepreneur, a solopreneur, if you're a corporate client, if you're CEO of a massive company, whatever it might be, that purpose is huge. And you're saying, and I'm nodding along with you, that when we find ourselves compromising, we pull ourselves back to that purpose. And sometimes we make compromises, and sometimes it seems like we're forced to, but that purpose pulls us back. Is that something that you've helped a lot of people with? Is this something that you see as a trend, that there's a lot of compromises going on right now?
We do definitely help people with that. I mean, I would say that in some cases that it's okay to make a compromise if, well, for example, this is a very, very live experience. And as an organization, we personally do lots and lots of pro bono stuff. We work with a lot of third sector organizations. I would say our sweet spot is when we're working on with a client, we'll always look to connect them with an organization that needs some support or needs a platform or needs funding. Nice. So that's what we do with every single client. Nice. And that's, we're mentors, we're trustees, we do pro bono work, we volunteer, and all our team has paid volunteering time. So, but we've got a situation at the moment where we offered to do something, a big project, pro bono, very, very important piece of work. And it's been done by it's been organised by somebody who wanted to support a big project, and we said, yeah, we're going to throw ourselves into this, we'll support you. And it's interesting that we are making a compromise currently because the behaviours of some of the team behind that, even though the end result's going to be amazing, the behaviours, and they are literally going against our values. And it's interesting that the team is saying to me, this behaviour is not great, this is not what we'd expect in this situation, but we're okay to make the compromise. We'll allow that boundary to slip here, because ultimately, if we show up and give good accounts of ourselves and do what we said we'll do, the way we said we'll do it, the end result is going to be that a number of charities are going to benefit from this, and this will have a positive impact. So that's an example of where we're prepared to make that compromise. If it was a commercial situation and there were fees involved and we were being paid, we would walk away. And we've done that recently too, where we had worked so hard in over a very long period of time, 6-7 months, do a huge pitch, and we won the business. And the business was a legacy piece of work, which was very important to me personally, actual fact. But the behaviour of some of the people in the client team was so gaslighting and so undermining to this my team, that we had to say no matter how important and big this is and how much value it was for us as an organisation on the back of COVID. We're like, no, it doesn't fit with our values, and this is why. And the main client had to say, I really understand that, I really apologise, I can't make those changes quick enough in order to make a difference to you, so we parted company. So we weren't prepared to compromise on that. And that value means that my commitment to the team is I can keep the team safe, protected, secure, the fact that they won't have to compromise their values and their self-respect.
Going back to that guardrail analogy, if you have your values as your guardrail, and if why is the reason why you're going down the road in the first place, then as you come along these different compromises, should I take a right or a left here, you have these two different things that are weighing in you. Why am I going forward, and what's keeping me from going off the edge? I think about, as you were saying that, I'm thinking, okay, are there times where I've compromised? I'm sure nothing comes off the top of my head, but have I compromised my mission, and was there a good why? And did I compromise my values? Even in the midst of just organizing my daily schedule, there's always a why behind it. And I always encourage people to have their own why. Like, why do you do what you do? And then if you have things that don't fit in, that's a compromise, then you're going to be more able to put those boundaries in place.
Yeah.
So you got your values, you got your why. Let's make a shift right here, because you said something earlier that I think is interesting. You said PR. Now, public relations is often what we think about when we see PR, but you redefined public or PR as not public relations, but purposeful relationships. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah.
So what does it mean for you? And you do all this pro bono work, so you're definitely involved in community, 25 years in Manchester, an expanding agency, a great team. So you're obviously a person who's modeling purposeful relationships. What does it mean for the average business person, career-minded person to embrace that type of PR?
Well, I think generally everything is about relationships. And if you look at where magic happens and where you can move the needle, and that can be a corporate requirement, or it can be a charity that needs to create more engagement for itself in order to support the people it supports. It's all about relationships. And I think there's a real old style, again, going back to leadership, that the old style of leadership was, I'm in control, I can do this, I've got that title, and not maybe being ashamed to be kind of vulnerable in a little way, where it's the fact that to acknowledge the fact that we all need other people to help us along the way. And once you get that, the world opens up. We all know that collaboration, and Manchester, I'm sitting here, Manchester is built on collaboration. I mean, we're a city of protest, industrial revolution. We're about relationships and collaborations. And so for me, every single thing we should be thinking about, first of all, if you get out of bed in the morning, personally, or even as a business leader, how can I add value today? Who can I help today? Because if you ask that question, and if you ask that question as a brand, and many brands are doing this now, they're using their platform to create environmental change or to reduce homelessness. Good brands do that. That's a part of their DNA. That creates great flow. It creates positive environment, and it creates good stuff coming back to you. So we encourage our clients to do that piece of work, because I think that's actually, it's having heart and purpose as a brand. And to make sure that everything that you do is built around that and it's connected. But for us, it's, the old term used to be stakeholder engagement. So, who do you need to communicate with? What messages do they need to hear? Where are they going to hear that? What do you want them to do? And I think it's moved on from that now. And I think if you begin, with the focus of what relationships can we create, what ripples can we create as a brand that are going to move out and it positively impact people, that's the heart of any communication strategy. And then whether that's social media, or is it seminars, is it speaking opportunities, is it media, all those things are just ways of supporting that storytelling around kind of your purpose and those relationships.
The purposeful relationships has definitely, as we moved away from the old style of leadership, the top down and more flattened out, it's definitely become something huge. What does it look like to do that, not only in your own organization, but how does it, when you're consulting maybe a person to build their platform, what are you telling them? What kind of advice are you giving them to do that?
Well, we always tell our clients to be, has to be authentic, and that in terms of the activity that they show up with, that is about making sure that they communicate that through every single thing that they do. So, for example, one of our values is planting trees. I suppose the point is here is that your values can become your brand. And I think if you look at some of the global brands, the right ones have done that. So that's what you don't associate them with this product necessarily. You associate them with how they show up in the world around their values. And one of the things, for example, using ourselves as a client, one of our values is plant trees you'll never see, leave a legacy out of respect for those who follow. And because everybody in our team who joins our team cites that as one of the reasons they're joining the team, because they know they'll have that space to be able to do that, create a legacy and a heritage. And it means that we physically give our team the tools to do that. So as I say, volunteering days, every single person in our team will work with a third sector or not-for-profit and is tasked with helping them to achieve their purpose. But the podcast that we have, for example, they're conversations with born, bred or adopted Mancunians. And within those conversations, it's just not a chronological view of what they've done in their lives. We talk to them about their purposeful relationships, their legacies, their values. So everything that we do as a business, that value runs through it. And so we then attract businesses who want to either do that work or come to us because we know that we'll look after their purpose and their reputation with integrity and with care. So it's so much about making sure that you have all those little touch points throughout your business, which are intrinsically linked with who you are as a business or a brand.
What I love that you do here is that you take these different areas like a purpose and the values and the purposeful relationships and the empathy. And instead of my go-to can be separating them in nice little neat categories. And you actually, they're woven together in your whole, what it seems like is your whole model and your whole encouragement for the professional. It's like not that you just do one or the other, but that you're putting these together and they flow so nicely into each other.
Yeah.
One last question. How can business leaders, business owners, people, and this is so woven into what you do, you guys are doing so much good stuff with your platform to the point where people are coming in and they get to work with a third sector or nonprofit. But how can someone's listening to this right here, they own a franchise, another person is a mid-level manager at Cisco or whatever it might be. And so you got some people in these kind of different sectors. How can they use their own platform for good?
I think that if you're in a position in an organization to look at the values of your business, if they're not apparent and you don't feel them, and you can't see how your organization is living with them, I think it's your responsibility to go and find out what they are, where they are, can you have a look at them, and how you can lead on those, how you can really make sure that you can support that piece of work for your organization to do, because it's life-changing. I mean, it will change the view of how you personally get out of bed every day if you feel that you're helping your business make such a difference and create that legacy. And one of our values is leave Roland Dransfield in a better place. So as we say, play for
which is your company, which is the org.
Yeah, so Roland Dransfield, play.
People are like, wait, who's that?
Sorry, so Roland, so our company, Roland Dransfield. So we say leave Roland Dransfield in a better place, and play for the name on the front of the shirt, not the back. So while you're with us, we'll enrich your life. That's our commitment. But you also, for the time that you're with this business, give it everything you've got, and then when you go, you can leave some legacy of your own within the business. So that's what I'd be saying to anybody, is that why don't you, if your business is not, the values and the purpose is not clear, find a way of changing that and leave a legacy within that business which make you feel great, and it'll move you on personally. And then I think in your personal life, if that's not a possibility, and that's just you've got a shut door, that's a bleak place. It's a bleak organization to be in my view. And I'm guessing if you're a person who feels deeply about making a difference, that's not going to be a place that you're going to stay in for too long. So do that work yourself. The best thing you can do is sit down and really feel what's important to you. Take that time to journal or write down, even if you do it one a day, find out what's important to you and then work out how you can act on those. But I love you talking about the rails. I've not thought about that analogy before, but for me personally, when I did this piece of work with the business, I also needed to do it at the same time in my own life. And metaphorically now I've realized that that's what I've done. It's meant that I don't have to listen to everybody's opinions on what's right for me, because I've set my values, and I know that if I go off to the left a little bit, I will align myself, because I'll admit it, fix it, move on. So I think the best piece of work I can say to anybody for personal joy and for business progression, do the work on the values for yourself or your organization.
That's great. This is some great words to kind of wrap up here. Lisa, where can people find you? Where can people connect with you? What is something that you want to remind people of, even as we wrap up this episode?
So, you can find my company, Roland Dransfield, on it's at RDPR Tweets, and on Instagram it's at Roland Dransfield, and same at Facebook. And I am at Lisa M2301 on Instagram, and at Lisa Morton on Twitter and on LinkedIn. And I think what the thing that gets us out of bed every day is helping organizations to use their platform to make change, and good brands should be doing that. And if you're working for an organization which doesn't, or you'd like to figure out how to do it, then we'd love to talk to you.
Love it. And I'll put all of those in the show notes and on YouTube and in the podcast, so that people can check that out as well. So you don't have to pause it and scribble too furiously. Just look it up afterwards. If you're driving, pull over first before you do it. But Lisa, thank you so much. I really appreciate that you are here with me today from the UK. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much. I've loved talking to you. And if you're ever in Manchester, I'll take you to a United game.
Love it. I'm game for that. And to all of our guests, thank you so much that you have been here, that you trust us with your time. Make sure that you take a moment to like, to comment, to share. Thank you for being part of this podcast, and I look forward to sharing more with you next week.
Thanks for listening to Advance with Mike Acker, a podcast designed to provide an edge for leaders through improving practical leadership skills and increasing confidence in speaking. Mike is a best-selling author and business owner who has helped many leaders increase their skills and their confidence, propelling them to new heights in their personal and professional endeavors. Join an incredible group of professionals taking the steps to become better leaders at connect.stepstoadvance.com. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe so you never miss an episode.